Today, flying is the safest form of transport, but the advancements that made it possible were not invented at random. They are the direct consequences of past accidents, and we have learned the hard way that even a single word can lead to disaster.
We now take off. Okay.
It's 1977. After a bomb explodes in the terminal of Gran Canaria Airport, a number of aircraft are diverted to neighboring island Tenerife, including KLM Flight 4805, as well as Pan Am Flight 1736. The regional airport on Tenerife was never meant to accommodate such traffic. The large 747s have no choice but to obstruct the taxiways. This meant that departing aircraft had to taxi along the runway itself. This is what both the KLM and Pan Am flights were instructed to do once the bomb threat on Gran Canaria Island was cleared. By the time that the Pan Am flight reached the runway, a dense fog had dropped visibility down to just 100 meters. As the airport was not installed with radar, the ATC was unable to tell the exact location of the planes. This should not have been an issue, however, as the KLM turned around at the end of the runway for takeoff, both ATC and first officer of the flight used non-standard phrases while communicating on the radio.
The KLM 4805 is now ready to take off and we're waiting for our ATC clearance.
KLM 8705, you're clear to the Papa Beacon, flying to and maintain flight level 90. Right, and after takeoff, proceed with heading 040 until intercepting the 325 radial from Las Palmas de Mar.
Roger, sure, we are cleared to the Papa Beacon. Flight level 90, right turn out 040 and intercepting the 325. And we are now taking off.
Okay. Okay, for takeoff, I will call you.
Due to radio interference, the part after the OK was unheard by the KLM crew. The Tenerife collision is the deadliest accident in aviation history, with a death toll of 583 people. There were many factors that went into the crash, from the initial diversion to the small airport, fog, lack of radar, miscommunication, radio interference, and more. However, the primary cause was attributed to the KLM captain, Veldhuizen van Zanten, who attempted to take off despite the lack of clear permission. Had any of the coincidences not occurred, including just a single word, all lives could have been spared that day. The disaster became one of the most influential in shaping modern aviation safety regulations. Large emphasis was put on standard phraseology around the world. For example, answers like OK are no longer adequate. In such a situation, ATC should now use the term hold position, which has to be acknowledged in a readback. The word takeoff is now reserved solely for when clearance for it is given or cancelled. Until that point, the word departure is to be used instead. These are seemingly minor but crucial details, which have possibly saved countless lives since 1977. Now let's jump back in time a little bit. In an age of bumpy and noisy propliners, a British company, de Havilland, promised smooth and quiet flights using jet engines, and they delivered. They called it the Comet. Developing it was no easy feat. Jet engines were still in their infancy and known to be fuel hungry at low altitudes. But the Comet cruised at over 40,000 feet thanks to a pressurized cabin. The revolutionary swept wing and overall low-drag design also helped reduce fuel consumption and made flights easily profitable. The Comet was on its way to be the airliner of the future. There was only one problem. In 2 years, 3 comets disintegrate midair with seemingly no explanation. The inquiries into the crashes were some of the most thorough engineering investigations of their time, and they set precedents for how modern accident boards conduct forensic analysis. The recovered wreckage alone was not enough to determine the cause of the breakups, so they began testing airframes in water tanks to simulate flight conditions. The experiment lasted months before signs began showing. A seemingly insignificant detail of the comet's design turned out to be the culprit: the square windows. Or so the public thought. This is a popular misconception as it made for juicy headlines, but the window's corners were actually rounded, and their shape had nothing to do with the crashes. The actual cause was a much smaller detail. You see, the rivets that hold the window frames in place were installed by a method called punch riveting, where instead of drilling holes for the rivets, they are punched through the metal. This technique added just enough extra stress to the airframe that through metal fatigue, a poorly understood concept at the time, cracks would begin forming after a few thousand flights. This was fixed by introducing thicker materials to the fuselage and going back to drill riveting. But if that's the case, why did they also redesign the windows to be circular? Well, the misconception had already spread. The public opinion was square windows equals death. As such, if de Havilland had any hopes of making a comeback, they needed to show people that the Comet 2 was a brand new plane. Unfortunately, orders for the redesigned plane were low. The damage had already been done. The company's reputation was tarnished, and the competition had caught up in the meantime. It's a real tragedy that the innovators of the jet airliner were not met with the success they deserved. Boeing and Douglas representatives privately disclosed that had the Comet not run into the pressurization problems first, it would have happened to them. The lives claimed by the Comet were inevitable in the race for innovation. That, however, doesn't mean that foresight cannot play a role. In the 1960s, national aviation authorities began considering crash scenarios with small likelihoods, like what if a plane loses all control? That's exactly what happened to Air Canada Flight 143 in 1983, when it ran out of fuel at an altitude of 41,000 feet above Red Lake, Ontario. Neither did the pilot's training nor the quick reference handbook include anything for such scenarios. What's even worse is that an airliner's control surfaces are powered by the engines. So, is the plane completely doomed? Not quite. The moment the systems on board detected a complete loss of power, a tiny wind turbine popped open. It's called a ram air turbine, or RAT for short. Its sole purpose is to supply power to the hydraulic systems, making the aircraft controllable. With the Boeing 767 turning into an oversized glider, the pilots had to improvise. Luckily, the captain, Robert Pearson, was an experienced glider pilot who did his best to maximize the aircraft's range. Regardless, their original plan to divert to Winnipeg was not possible, so First Officer Maurice Quintal suggested Gimli, a closed Air Force base. What he didn't know is that the facility had been converted to a racetrack complex, which just so happened to be holding a family day. As the aircraft approached the runway, the captain noticed that they were coming in too hot. To reduce speed and altitude, he crossed the controls to put the aircraft in a forward slip, a technique commonly used on gliders. The maneuver most certainly didn't calm passengers. It also disrupted airflow to the RAT, making the plane even harder to control. Pearson held the slip until the last moment possible. As he struggled to straighten the plane, him and Quintal both noticed the activity on the airfield. But there was no turning back now. As luck would have it, the drag strip that the plane touched down on was the one part of the facility unused that day, and so the miraculous landing ends up claiming the lives of no one. But there is an obvious question that needs answering. How does an airliner run out of fuel not even halfway to its destination? You see, countries like the US are often mocked for using the imperial system, but as long as a system of measurement is used consistently, there are no mistakes. When different systems get mixed together, That's when things go wrong. At the time of the accident, Canada's aviation sector just happened to be converting from imperial to metric units. Air Canada's new 767s were among the first to be calibrated. Both Pearson and Quintal, as well as ground crew, had used the old conversion constant of 1.77, which was in pounds per liter. But for the new Boeings, the kilogram per liter constant of 0.803 should have been used instead. This force of habit led to the plane taking off with 10,100 kilograms of fuel instead of the 22,300 kilograms actually needed. This tiny error would have led to the loss of a state-of-the-art aircraft if it wasn't for another small detail that allowed the skilled pilots to control the plane to a safe landing. Through these and many more accidents, flying has become an inherently risk-averse and safe form of transport, but that doesn't make it completely accident-free. After sunset at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, a Japan Coast Guard plane mistakenly thinks it received takeoff clearance and lines up on the runway just in front of a landing Airbus A350. Five out of the 6 on board the Coast Guard plane pass away. They were most likely in a hurry, as they were transporting aid to those affected by the 2024 Noto earthquake. The situation with the Airbus doesn't seem better, but all 379 people aboard the plane managed to evacuate in just 11 minutes. This was in part thanks to the professionalism of the cabin crew and the fact that passengers didn't try to bring luggage with them, something that has claimed lives before. Another factor that helped survival was the use of composite carbon fiber materials on the aircraft, which did well to withstand the initial impact and the ensuing fire. Decades ago, a crash of the same caliber would have made the headlines for the tremendous loss of life. Today, it makes the headlines for the opposite reason. Every part of modern aviation, even the most insignificant, was shaped by lessons written in tragedy. Every design choice, procedure, word serves purpose. That is, to keep you safe. Even though it's impossible to always account for everything, aboard the plane, you are among the safest people on the planet.